Hey everybody, welcome to the shop. So today I'm going to be working on an order for a customer. I've got to make a small sign that they've ordered. And the first step is take these two boards and join them together. It's just some dimensional 1x that I got at the local hardware store. So what I want to do first is get the boards lined up and make a mark across each board. And that's gonna let me know right where I want to cut with my biscuit joiner. So in this case, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marks on here. And what I like to do is take the board closest to me, spin it once, put it back down. Now I've got all these lines on here. Don't mind the writing on here. That was from some other project. As you might be able to see though, it's kind of tough, but here's the lines that I've marked. When you spin the board back around and line them up, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So spin that back. Now I've already made the adjustment on my biscuit joiner for the depth. You know, how far down I want to be. And I want to be right in the center of the thickness of the board when I cut these. Now, a nice thing about this is there's this little line here, and you would line that right up to the line on the board and make your cut for each one right down the line. Then move this board out of the way, put the next one on top, and do the same thing. And when you're done, all the spots you've cut will line up. And then it's time for glue and clamping. Well, now that the spots are cut for the biscuits, it's time to add some biscuits and glue. I like to use the Tight Bond 2, the blue bottle. I tend to just refill these. I buy the big jug and just refill these small bottles. It's just a lot easier to work with. Get all this dry glue off the end of this here. Probably should have done that ahead of time. All right. So we made 5 cuts. We'll need 5 biscuits. I've got number 20 biscuits. These are the biggest ones that I have. And these are what I like to use for this kind of stuff. What I want to do is have this one board on end. And I turn it so the glue kind of runs down the side of the slot that we just cut. This is going to be excessive. There's going to be a lot more glue in there than I need. When I put this thing together, we're going to have squeeze out. That's fine. I'll let that happen and then we'll wipe that up. Besides, these are going to get sanded once glued and cut on the table saw. I'll have to sand it all down and sand all this writing off from a previous project. I was kind of using these just to mock something up before. I'm going to put glue in the slots we cut on the next board. And it's time to flip it over and make sure all the marks we made line up. Now when you cut the slots for the biscuits, they are a little bit bigger than the biscuits, so you have room to slide this board back and forth. It's got a little bit of play in there. So it's important to line up the marks that you made previously, just so everything's lined up, I guess. I'm going to take a few clamps. I like to start with one right on each end first. Try to make sure the clamp is in the center of the thickness of the board. You know, you got how thick the board is here. I want my clamp to be in the center, not on one edge or the other. What happens is you start to clamp down kind of tight and you'll really start to warp the two boards that you're putting together. Now that kind of happens sometimes anyway, you know, especially if you don't have a good straight edge on the wood you're using. These ones I already looked at, they were pretty good, so it should be fine. Again, putting this other clamp, making sure it's in the middle of the thickness of the board here. I hope that makes sense. And then just clamping down enough to make sure my gap here is closed. I don't want to over tighten these. You want to just make sure everything is it's nice and snug, maybe just a little bit extra, a little past snug, so it's just nice and tight, you know. Just put a couple in the middle, and I like to alternate them, so opposite side. I also like to keep all these ends that are the longest on the top, so if I decide to set this thing on the floor, you know, it'll just sit level. I'm just looking down the board here, kind of eyeballing this stuff to make sure it's not bowed one way or the other. And they actually look pretty good. I see a little bit of squeeze out. I'm just gonna run my hand down the seam there and just push any of that squeeze out right back into that seam. Doesn't look like there's gonna be too awful much. We just gotta wait for this glue to fully dry, and then we can come back and trim this to size. All right, so I let this dry for a couple hours just to make sure that the glue was all set up, everything was dried. Now it's time to take these clamps off. There's no real particular order I do that in. Something I try to do is undo the end ones at the same time though, so there's not more force here than here. The potential to pop the opposite end out. I know it's tough to see this. I've got some glare with the lighting here in my shop. Hopefully I can get some new lights soon, but I've got to work with what I've got for now. This side's got writing on it, so I'm flipping it over to a nice clean side to work on. Well, I'm going to have to cut both of these ends. We're going to have to make 3 cuts actually. I'm going to have to cut these ends off and 1 cut down the side here, because I want this to be 15 inches by 15 inches by 15 by 15. How do we go about making this into a square? First thing I'm going to do is get one of the nice clean edges. So it's going to be this one here. I'm going to take this big square, get it lined up with this nice straight edge on the board, and I'm going to make a mark. It's going to be a cut line. I'm also spacing this in quite a bit, so I'm just going to get rid of these knots that are on the end, the boards here I use. We'll cut those right off. Take my tape measure and start measuring just from the other side of the line. So I'm going to line my tape measure up on the left side of the line we just made. Measure down to about 15, make a mark. And I want to take my square and line it up with that mark. Now, when I cut these, it'll be the right width, but it's going to be the wrong height. That's okay. I got to make these 2 cuts first, then I can worry about bringing this down to the 16-inch mark. So right now, we got to jump over to the table saw and make these 2 cuts. This is it for this video today. Stay tuned for part 2, the final video in this project. I hope you liked that last video. If so, hit subscribe. I really appreciate it. It's a great boost to see people subscribing to my channel. I've got a bunch of different videos popping up here for chainsaw carvings to furniture, working on your equipment. Check them out. Listen, I just want to thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe. Use those thumbs up. See you next time.